All right, plan weekly meeting, 14th of April, 2021. Alexis is Alexis here? No?
She even noted she's not going to be here, so it's read only, but it looks like some praise for this KR. Improving visibility of system status and system performance.
Cool. Does anyone have visibility over this? Could speak a bit about it?
I'm not familiar with her specific changes, but I've been working on similar changes, and I would echo the sentiment that everyone has been really attentive and jumping on these as we've been flagging them because it's a UX KR. So thank you all so much for being attentive to those.
None of us may have any idea what we did, but the important part is we did it.
Go team, that's right.
Awesome. All right. Jake, you for the next one.
Sure, yeah, just in case you haven't seen it, the sad news is that we're loaning Heinrich over to the DB team for, I have the issue link here, I don't think. The next 3 releases, they're kind of splitting the database team into 2 teams, one to focus on sharding, which is like a massive effort, which I think they're still kind of like in the figuring out phase of determining how that will work and how that will help and how to even approach that. So some of the sort of more experienced database engineers are moving over to work on that, and then we are they're kind of backfilling temporarily the database team with folks from other teams, including Heinrich. So it's unfortunate for us, but it's also really important stuff for GitLab to succeed and get past some of these trickier database scalability issues that we've been running into. So with regards to the real-time subscription work that Heinrich's been working on recently, the goal is to get that into get that through review and merged here in the next week or so, that we can kind of at least have that ongoing piece at a point where it makes sense before he's sort of off the team for several months. And similarly with the SMTP connection pooling stuff that he's worked on, that's on production, but there's some omnibus and a couple other things to like config changes to wrap up before that's closed out. So sort of wrapping up some of the stuff he's working on, and then he'll be moving over starting with 13.12, so starting next week.
Is it going to be like a full-time or some sort of a ratio where he would be helping with plan, or it's just not?
Yeah, I mean it's full-time. He's still reporting to me, so we'll still talk, and like he's generally everywhere. Like he generally tends to weigh in on stuff like this, so I wouldn't hesitate to ping him, things like the relative positioning stuff that you're working on. He'll still be around to talk through, and we're not gonna, I in some ways, other than like the specific work that comes out of plan, I'm sure the social and collaborative aspect of having him on the team won't change too much, because he'll still be paying attention to this stuff.
Yeah, cool. I just made the point there that like the sharding work is pretty interesting, because given our work on issue types, I would expect it to be naturally the issues table to be a candidate for sharding across issue type.
I don't know if that's feasible. Like shards, like I don't have a very deep understanding, but highly is like very hard to communicate between shards. I think it's like somewhat expensive sort of thing. So when you shard something, it's more of like you treat it more of like a separate, at least as a separate table, if not as a separate context altogether, maybe like a database or something like that. Not 100% sure on that, but I think that's where, at least I know that in my SQL that was kind of the case in a lot of the instances. So.
No, I think you're right. Like, but that's why I thought that issue type was pretty much a good candidate, because you have this enormous table that will only get bigger.
Yeah, but you want to have the same types within the same group and stuff like that. So if you shard issues by types, then having different types in one group can be very hard in a way to present it in the same list and so on.
But yeah, that's the thing though. Would we want?
Yeah, because like,
Do we want to show them
Yes.
the same list? Okay, then it's not.
I mean, there might be a couple that we don't, but when you think about custom issue types, like right now we only have like 3, but in the future there might be 15, right? Because the customer might make their own. And so for those, you're going to want to show them all in the same list. And also, I haven't gotten any feedback that folks don't want things in boards as well. Like they want incidents in boards, they want requirements in boards. It's just because it's a way to visualize work, right? And so that's why, like, I don't know if sharding would work for issue types, but I've not my call.
But the same types, really? Like you would want a board with requirements and regular issues?
Yeah, think about it. What if you want to group? Like right now we have swim lanes for epics, but I could see it valid being having swim lanes for requirements, so you can see all the issues that are implementing a requirement, for example. Or you might want to have just requirements on your board, but you're going to maybe want to expose, like, thinking long term, maybe MRs that are related to it or something like that are going through different workflow stages. So the requirements is the only one where it may not make the most sense, but I know test cases, people are using issues for that right now. We'll import a bunch of stuff, create a board for a specific release, dump all their test cases in there, and then move issues through different lists, basically. So yeah, seems like it would be harder if you were to have to, like, let's say, query epics from a different, like, Postgres database compared to, like, the issues, and then somehow reconcile which issues belong to which epic, like, on the fly. I don't know, just thinking out loud.
Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah. So I wonder if this new sharding team will take input from us, or whether they'll analyze the database and queries going to the database that we already make and make decisions on where to shard from that. Because we're in the middle of bringing in issue types, so things could look very different in 12 months.
like a good sharding might be separating closed or done issues from open issues or something. So it's more of like moving the archived one that you're not really interested into out of the querying sort of space. So you kind of query less issues than you have to query otherwise, perhaps.
I was also going to say, I do think the sharding team, from the brief one that I had with Christopher Lefholtz, is taking into account where we want to go, not where we're at today. So he asked me, I guess it was March 25th. He's like, what's the architecture you're proposing we move towards for product planning, or like for a plan as a whole? And they said, like, hey, we want to, like, consolidate everything down in types of issues. We want to eventually consolidate groups of projects in the same entity if that's possible. And, like, kind of, he didn't say anything back to that, but he asked. So I told him. So we'll see.
I would expect that for our purposes, it would make most sense to do sharding per top level groups, because most typically we list resources by group or any descendant groups or epics. So we are almost always limited by the group we are working in. Not sure if it will be reflected for sharding, but I can imagine that this would make most sense.
What happens when we want to share across groups then?
I just on a coffee chat with Fabian Zimmer, who's the PM in the database working group, and these are all the conversations we just basically had this conversation. It was really interesting. So
yeah, I mean, sharing across shards should be still possible. It might not be just so performant, because we already link resources across different groups. Like if you link labels from completely different group, it's still possible, or issues. But yeah, perhaps it wouldn't be just so performant, but it still must be supported. Yeah.
Cool. Anything else on sharding?
I think it will. I saw under issue specific discussions and demos Jan's point, so we can get to that. But it'll be interesting to see how all of these database change. Like there's significant plans for the database to change architecturally, like over the course of the next several months, and those things may make. It's a frightening scenario to have like these massive changes to the database architecture happening while we're also trying to make significant change to the application, like whether it's consolidating groups and projects. So I'm just, I guess, more eager to see what their plans are for the sharding stuff and how that will work, which it sounds like Gabe had some of that conversation before. So we'll see, but yeah, it's going to be something to stay on top of, I guess, for us, and every team probably will suffer some pain from it. So we'll see how it goes.
I don't think we're yet at the point where we have to shard issues. I think that's more of a issue with the CI deals and so on, because they have so much more data there that, and there's a lot of it is also like coming obsolete very, very fast, right? You run a build and like next day you mostly don't need it or something like that. So that's more of an issue there, but not so much for the issues, I don't think. But I'm sure we'll learn a lot from their experience, and then we can think of how we can apply it to plan.
Just on that, like it's not typical probably for most customers, but if you view the GitLab org issue list and you order it by anything, I think, other than created at, well, I ordered it by popularity. The SQL query takes 10 seconds to return. And that happens in the initial page load. So yeah, it's, like I said, not indicative, as we're probably the largest user of GitLab.com, but we're definitely getting to the point, I think, where we need to look at the issues table. Cool. Gabe, you're up.
Yeah, I wanted to start the conversation now. I know I scheduled a meeting, I think, next week to talk with some of the designers and at least the EMs in my stage. John, you're welcome to join if you want as well. But just about 14.1, I know for my team at least, and I think Kristen and Mark are largely on board as well, kind of looking at pausing sort of new feature development from like a capability standpoint and spending several releases refactoring, paying down technical debt, paying down product debt, and then laying like the proper groundwork for converting plan objects to issue types and extensible issues. Like we sort of need to get if we're going to do this, we need to like focus just on that for a while, and also like pay down a bunch of debt so that we can go faster later, but also so that we can move epics into a type of issue and have that sort of higher work item hierarchy. And so it's not just like, the goal is not just to do that work, but also it's like really, we have accrued, not just performance problems, but technical debt. And that's not a bad term. It's like we made decisions to move faster over more complete code or whatever we want to do. And I think it's caught up with us a little bit. And I've noticed and heard from the engineers that it's taking longer to make changes, which is also a good sign that we need to slow down and go back and fix some of that stuff. So all that said, I wanted to start asking the engineers for input on what areas of the product that is our surface area do we need to focus on paying down technical debt, refactoring certain things, making it so future changes are easier, and just start thinking about if we are to take this like period of time and pause like our feature roadmap, like I want to do velocity for iterations, like pushing that stuff out into the future so that we can get the right foundation in place. What would that look like, and what would you all like to focus on? Because I want it to be like everyone provide input. So there's some other things too, like we're proposing a new issue view, largely because we also want to build a single view app for the issue view. And I think that will help with performance and other things. But if we're going to have to refactor that whole view, we might as well like take the time to make any UX changes that we want to make, among other things. So there's a lot of things moving forward. Nothing has been sequenced or like decided on. I'm more or less trying to collect a bucket of all of the things that we want to accomplish during that period, and then work with engineers and UX to figure out the optimal way to sequence them into different themes and like share the workload over a couple releases. So that's just like a general announcement. I'll drop an issue to a specific Epic and plan later today once I create it. But I'd like to just start collaborating there and invite everyone to provide feedback and to list out the things that you notice that really need to be improved upon or cleaned up.
Thanks, Gabe. I added here a link to a spreadsheet that might help you visualize the convergence between all of the different plan objects. We do have a lot more going on around extending issues as well as the design of them. But this can help us sort of look at the metadata that's there. I know I've mentioned this spreadsheet before. I think also, Gabe, I'm not sure if you mentioned this, but we're talking about, I think you touched on it, but a design focus for 4 to 6 weeks, working ahead of engineering to try to figure out not only the design of the app, but also just what, if we look at this spreadsheet, like what are the required fields essentially for each issue type, and which view will be the first one we work on, whether it's, Gabe, I think you mentioned the view on a board, like when you open the issue as a modal or as a sidebar, and then port that over to the actual issue page or Epic page, or if we start on something like epics or start on requirements.
Yeah, I think we can sort that out, and that's why I invited engineers to come to like the design phase as well and participate in that, so they can give us guidance. Mm-hmm. We could start with requirements, I think, or the board view, starting with, like, I don't know if we can do epics until epics are a type of issue, right? Like, I don't know if I would want to implement a new view for epics if it's going to not exist later, if that makes sense. So like,
for sure, yeah.
So that's where I don't really have a strong opinion, honestly. Like, I want to see like the whole like vision achieved, but how we get there, I really want to rely on the team to provide guidance for that. So
yeah.
That spreadsheet's awesome, by the way.
Thanks.
Alex, you want to verbalize your point?
Yeah, to the list, the issue, to the list of what needs to be refactored or worked on, sort of on my technical debt catching up. I was just like, it's something that is on my mind for the last few weeks with the relative positions. So I was just throwing that out there, but nothing specific really, just mentioning it.
Out of curiosity, as we are talking about relative positioning, how realistic would it be to switch to pair board position for issues in any near term? Because I expect we would have to do this if we want to. We would have to do this later anyway. So I was wondering if we can do it now or in close term.
Why would we have to do it later anyway? Like, if we can make relative position in the hierarchy work, I don't think we need to.
Yeah.
Because,
so,
and I'll let Gabe speak more to that, because I think he was mentioning that we do want to have the same ordering in different views. So if you go to a list view, to a board, to another board, and see the same issues, you want them sorted in the same way. Like, keep this kind of, you don't have to sort it every time on every single view. You just sort it once, and then you have the positioning sort of thing.
I see. So yeah, the idea was that for Epic boards, it was explicitly requested to have it per board. And if you would make Epic's issue type, it would mean that it's just another issue. So then there would be some inconsistency between these types. So we would have to decide whether we want to switch to global positioning for epics or to pair board positioning for issues, unless we want to keep different positions for different types. but perhaps this is something to figure out later if epics are not converted to issue type anytime soon. It was just a thought, if we would consider switching to pair board positions for issues anyway, if we could do it now, because it would solve us some work with figuring or with fixing the relative positioning globally.
I'll say my 2 cents. I think it's something that we should think about, especially as we're refactoring some stuff and maybe even like spend some good design time solving for. Like right now, I'm struggling with the fact that epic boards have their own position, because when I've looked at an epic board and I see like, items that are on there in a certain order, like maybe I have epics that are like workflow, like in development or happening. And then I go to my issue board and I turn on swim lanes, nothing's in that same order. And it's like sort of jarring and I can't like flow through, like basically zooming in and out of planning artifacts in a way that keeps things in a sane like organization structure. And then also I do switch between 4 different board views, which is like a list that has our team lists, it has like iteration lists. One board has milestone lists, and another board is like our workflow board. But I do think there's an opportunity to figure out how to save ordering across like a number of views without it being global, if that makes sense, like to everything in the group. So like if there was a way where we had a board that you could like have these different saved views with these different lists, like technically they're individual boards right now, but really they're just like my team boards where I want these different views and I want to just toggle between them really quickly. You could save the ordering there, and then I wouldn't care, because if I had like a list view and I had a board view that had some settings and another board view that had other settings, and then maybe I even want to see the roadmap attached to that, right? And like saving the position of the things that I care about across those like different, what are now separate views, could solve the problem, because the ordering would be still localized to whatever those sets of views that I'm looking at are. So that could be an opportunity or way to solve it. I don't know how, but I think we should also consider that from a product standpoint, because it does make sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good point. Would you mind to create an issue or suggestion for this both local or semi-local positioning, so we can think about it? I know Jarka is working on positioning for per epic boards, so I guess we will think about it later, but perhaps something to be aware of, because there are also some complications with pair board positioning. So
This might be another candidate for like when you have a query that you've got to, and you could switch the view on it and it would retain things like sort order or some higher level view settings. This is a different idea entirely, but I do think we're seeing more and more where you might want to have a really specific query or a specific sort order, and then view it as roadmap, view it as board, view it as list. And I think where we need to be more flexible with boards, it feels from a workflow perspective, like in terms of how you set the board up. When we get to roadmaps, the same problem is going to exist, where people want a very specific roadmap view that they've set up and saved and are evangelizing up the chain up to executives or things like that. And they don't want it to just be changing on the fly. So I think this is a really important problem to solve. If we can figure something out for how to save them local/global.
All right, I'll open up the issue, and then we can all start kind of talking there. I don't know what the solution is in my head. Sometimes I do, but this is where I think it's really going to be a team effort and largely UX driven. I mean, we can kind of come in with some requirements, but it's like it's a different way to think about our product. But I do think the constraint of like how can we get rid of global relative positions but maybe have like a smaller version of that that's like in safe is a very viable path to look at. So
Or just make global work.
do that too. But there's also problems with that. Like that's where when I joined GitLab, I was super frustrated because I was like, I didn't know about that at the time, and I like organized the board, and then I went and looked at it a day later, and everything was like all over the place. And I was like, hey, did somebody touch the board? They're like, no. I was like, well, what happened? They're like, oh, it's like global ordering. Somebody changed it in the list somewhere, and it like reorganized everything. And I was like, what? And anyway, pros and cons.
Yep.
Cool. So unless anyone has more comments on this one, I have a next comment. It's related to project group consolidation we were discussing in last weeks, and quite bad news is that so far we don't have a viable solution or proposal how to proceed. Supposing that the goal is to just have one container entity in future instead of having both projects and groups. So there doesn't seem to be some clear solution for this, and so far it rather seems that we would keep maintaining both. So this will have impact on many upcoming features or proposals, specifically to issue types, to resource sharing, and perhaps some others. So if you have some, the main problem for not doing this consolidation is that this will be quite difficult, and it means to introduce a big technical debt for a long time. Yeah, because the deprecation can happen only in 6 months or more. And during this time, we would have to maintain hacks or workarounds in our code. And there is quite a resistance to go down this path. So if you have some opinions or suggestions that you are convinced that we should go this way, even if it means introducing big technical debt, or if you think that there is some other option, please comment on the issue.
I'm going to stay out of the technical decision for that one. So I kind of left a note there about my standpoint from like a philosophical / proc position longer run. Why I think we need to consolidate it, but if we don't end up doing that, we do some sort of other like abstraction, it is what it is. But I did surface this with David DeSanto along with the workspace stuff, just saying like, hey, this is something that we wanted to invest in FY22 from a product standpoint. It's not moving very quickly. I don't think there's a clear path forward. Like we either need to decide to do it or not do it. And Tim Zalman said that he is supportive of the goals and like is going to commit to like helping push it forward and figuring out what that looks like from the engineering side. So I don't know what all that means. We basically just can't jeopardize the database work that we're doing. But both can be done in parallel. And I think there might even be some benefits to the database stuff in the long run. So we'll see how that materializes, but at least we'll get some more support on that particular work stream, I think.
Okay, that's cool. Yeah, I think that, yeah, if it means convincing some other this way might be another approach might be to just breaking some rules which were settled in the discussion so far. So we don't want to introduce other naming or other entity like workspace. We don't want to introduce some long-term technical debt. So if we can break some of this rule, then yeah, it would be a way forward too.
Yeah, the other thing I was just going to add is like, I think the fear is just the long running technical debt and we'll like have to stop in the middle. And I think that what I'm trying to do, at least from like my angle of things, is is helping alleviate this by like ensuring the whole organization is behind the effort and committed to doing their part when the time comes. So that way, like if we do choose to take on some of the cycle, that we have confidence that we're going to see it through, and we have backing of like our entire leadership level. That's part of the reason why I started as the working group and like went up and presented this to Sid and said, hey, like, is it okay if we consolidate these down? Like, do we have your approval? Because I definitely couldn't be the DRI for that, and he was supportive of it. But I think now we're sort of getting to the point where we are starting to do the work, and we need to get like the, you know, Tim and Eric and Chris on board. And I think if we do that, then we'll be successful, even if we do take on technical debt for a little bit. But I'm curious to see where we land. And thank you, Jan, for doing such a good job with the POC and contributing via merge requests.
Well, thanks for great news about this progress on product side.
There's no way to do this that we don't end up with some significant technical debt for a period, right? I mean, it's just a fact of life.
Yeah, at least there is no, yeah, I'm not aware of not technical debt approach we could use. Introducing a new entity to which we would slowly migrate would be less technical debt, because this new entity would be basically the end state we want to reach. Yeah. So, but the problem is that there was pushback against introducing new entities instead of the existing ones. For example, workspace. Yeah.
What is the difference? And I guess this is a question that I've always wondered. What's the difference between a namespace and a group?
Yeah, not so much, I would say.
It's backed up by the same database table, if that's what you're asking.
Oh, you mean on backend side? Yeah, basically namespace is term for both personal namespaces, which are namespaces, and groups which inherit from namespace.
So when a user creates projects in like that are his personal, they go to a sort of a personal group that is called a namespace, and then you have the group entity as it is. So like on the back end, it's pretty much the same thing with the slide. It's just a difference in type, but it's backed by the same database table. So does that answer your question? Or?
Yeah, it does. There's also some weird behavior when personal namespaces and group namespaces, especially from like a billing perspective, that I think I was talking to Jeremy before he left, and he said if I could wave a magic wand, I would make every personal namespace be a group, basically, so it behaves the same way. And I'm wondering if there's like a way that we could more or less make a project a namespace and then move everything into the namespace level and out of the group and the project level. I
mean, it should not be a big thing. I just don't know how that interacts with billing, as you're saying, because like I would need to look into that, but I'm not sure how our groups relate to a subscription. Do we have some sort of a direct relationship between groups and subscriptions, or how do you account for that? And then if you make a user namespace into a group, how does that fit into the whole billing structure, right? But like other than that, making the user namespaces B groups is not a big issue whatsoever. It's just really how does that play out with the billing? How do we separate those from not being billed, or backwards compatibility and so on?
Yeah, I'll look into that a little bit, because I think I recall something being like, I can subscribe to GitLab Ultimate in my personal namespace, but I can't use any of the group features because my personal namespace is in a group.
Yep.
Which just doesn't make a lot of sense.
Cool. Kristen, you're up.
Yeah, so I just linked to our March update for the epics, and if everyone wanted to see it, I noticed that we passed 100,000 epics created cumulatively on .com, which is really cool. And also we had 2 significant months of growth, 40% month over month on just epic creation. The link to there's a link from the chart actually, or from that handbook page that shows to Sisense, but also the 100K cumulative epics, which is pretty cool. Just thanks to everyone. It seems like we're getting a lot of good growth there. And it's really exciting to see how people are using epics. So good work, team.
What effect do you think epic boards will have on the creation and use of epics?
I think that we may have to evangelize that workflow a little bit, but we'll see. Like I don't normally create things off boards myself. We'll just have to see how customers do. But definitely whenever we get the create button onto it, I think that's going to go out with 14.0. That will hopefully spike it. I think we'll see views go up as well from that. We'll just have to see if our customers think about it in terms of creation when they're in the board environment.
It seems like there's extraordinary customer interest in boards. Would you, epic boards, like, would you agree?
Yep, and I'm going to actually talk to a data analyst this morning, but it looks like we're having a lot of ultimate use, a lot more, like a spike in our ultimate users. So I'm not sure if we brought on some really big customers, but I'm trying to get to the bottom of that. But it's exciting, and it'll be interesting to set the next targets for the team, because also this data, if you look at the chart, this is just on epic creation, not on all of the aggregates. So like this, all the work that we just did to have all the event tracking added, we're going to augment this chart, and it should go up even more, because it will have, anytime someone interacts with an epic, will influence this Gmail number as well.
Gabe?
Oh yeah, I'm excited about epic. Sorry, you can go ahead, Alexander. I'll go after you.
Yeah, okay. I was just wondering if we know if this growth in epic creation is more of like the same users creating more epics, or more users creating epics overall.
I think that there's a bit of both, actually. If you look at that Gmao chart, the first one that's in there, that's Mao creating epics. Those are the individual users. So growth on that chart is also up a lot, and that's up to 5,333. That's individual new users who decided to create an epic in that month. And then the other that I referenced was the cumulative, just in the database, hitting 100K epics created. So that's another metric. But yeah, you could be a vamped up PM making 100 epics in one shot for sure.
Yeah, thanks.
I'm just going to add that I'm going to use epic boards exclusively once they're ready. That's also where I'm keenly interested in solving the problem of switching between an epic board and my issue board with swim lanes with epics. So you can visualize your epics and where they're at, then you can transition into the workflow for each thing. But I also wanted to, I don't know if y'all saw, I can't remember who posted it in Slack. If you did, you can take credit for it, because I just read somebody else's great observation that epics, the MVC for boards, was the most clicked item in the last release post, I think, out of every other feature that we shipped in that release as a company. So it is very much highly anticipated.
Yeah. It's exciting. I can't wait for that feature to be up and running fully. Also, thanks to everyone who instrumented, and we will have there's a new instrumentation issue for boards, which is also going to be prioritized by 14.0 so that we can really see how many people use it on day one.
Cool. lastly, I don't need to spend a ton of time on this, but I did drop in a link to the project management PI updates. We are on track to hit our free and paid targets. We've already hit our free targets. I think we're about 5,000 miles short for our paid targets with one reporting period left, which if monthly growth is any indication, we should barely hit our paid target. But part of the reason why like our usage ping is down a little bit, like there was a 7-point drop. I think there was 39% of instances reporting usage ping in the previous release or the previous reporting period, and this time there was only 36%. And then also the end of life for starter, like basically that was one of our kind of big growth tiers. It's basically that growth is stalled out and even declined on SaaS, and we haven't seen that same, like all those users haven't transitioned basically over to premium right now. And so we'll adjust our targets for next month to take that into consideration, but those are the two factors that I found that were sort of like slowing things down just a little bit, but it's not that big of a deal. So if you have any questions, let me know.
Cool. Alex, you want to verbalize yours?
Yeah, I was just trying to give more of a heads up. I'm suspicious that 13.11 will be lighter in features just because of the focus on the performance stuff. But I was really hoping to get iteration cadences and automation out in this release, but it is not going to happen. So it's more of a heads up kind of announcement. So yeah, that's one item on my list that I want to get to, but it's really behind more work on relative positions and some bug fixing there, and hopefully get the rebalance in a state where we can use it. That will take some extra time from.
Yeah, I totally understand. I'm supportive of the shift to focus. I even called it out on the PA page that we were going to probably pause some of the feature work when we can. I talked to Jake and Donald, and I think I'd love to at least get it to a good stopping point by the end of 14.0 before we start like the feature freeze. So even if we can get not the automated part bit, but just like the iteration cadences where you can create manual iterations within each cadence, that would solve a lot of the customer problems that they're having right now. And if we can get there by the end of 14, that'd be great. So I'm supportive of the shift in priorities.
There are bits and pieces, but there is some more work to be done to consolidate everything, to just make everything kind of work together, both from the UI and front end perspective, but also from the back end. We do have some back end in place, we have some front end work in place, but then we need to kind of give it up and make it all work together. So hopefully we can get something touchable sort of and deployable to the customer by 14.0.
I think one benefit of the shift in focus has been at least that we've had more eyeballs from around the engineering department as a whole on less performant areas of plan. The one that comes to mind, I'll paste it into the agenda after all the exclamation points that Gabe's just made, is the milestones page, which had a lot of, like, I think it had n+1 in counts of MRs. So for every milestone that was loaded in the list, we did a count of MRs for that milestone. It was like horribly slow. And we had Valerie come in and fix that one. So we're collecting some input from other parts of the organization as well. So it's disruptive to what we planned for the milestone, but it also has some side benefits that we're collecting engineering input from around the organization.
It also has the added benefit of shining a light on everything that we have within plan, like a lot of the plan functionality. We're always sort of like battling against where revenue is generated for kind of arguing for investment and things like that. But most of plan is core functionality for GitLab, like issues and labels and milestones, things like that. So it's kind of a good, you know, as painful as it can be to sort of have these rapid priority changes and trying to investigate, you know, obscure performance issues, it is a good kind of spotlight on just how much of what we work on is core to the entire application. So cool in some ways. You're muted, John.
Sorry. Any other topics? Cool.